A fella named Don Amore, big sports writing legend in Connecticut, and been a buddy of mine since I got to town in '89. And lucky for us, he's at the other end of this phone line. Hello, Dom.
Hey, good afternoon, John. How you doing? Great hearing your voice as always.
Well, I'm doing fine. The show is doing fine. We're on 1 hour, 4 to 5 on Saturday afternoons, and we love every minute of it. I mentioned about Dom being a top-flight sports writer. Well, he's set out for himself a very big job. As you know, Jim Calhoun was the great basketball coach in Connecticut who led them to national championships. And, you know, Connecticut, that's not exactly a big school. It's not Duke or North Carolina. Well, Dom is writing the book on Jim Calhoun. How is the book going?
Well, John, it's finished. We're going to start running excerpts in my newspaper, the Hartford Courant, beginning tomorrow. And I think people are really going to like it. I think for UConn fans, there are a lot of them out there. It's a must-read. And I think for basketball fans or people who are just interested in how coaches coach, I think there's going to be a lot in it for them, too. You know, it's not a memoir. Jim wrote his memoirs 25 years ago. This is Jim basically reflecting on his relationships with 14 or 15 different players. A lot of the famous ones that you know about, Ray Allen and Kemba Walker and Caron Butler, but also maybe some lesser-known players he coached when he was a high school coach way back when and who've made successful careers in other walks of life. So it's a people book, and I think it's called More Than a Game, and it really illuminates Jim's relationships. And if you know Jim or know a lot about him, you know that relationships are everything with him.
Well, he strikes me, and I do not know him, he strikes me as a pretty tough guy. In those days, the basketball coaches were really tough on their players. That's all changed now, of course. Now they got to be nice to him.
Well, don't tell that to Dan Hurley. But yeah, he certainly was a tough guy, and he was a demanding guy. But he always really brought out the best. And one anecdote that I'll give away. The book, by the way, is Woodhall Press. It'll be out later in the summer. But you know, he had a student manager who he barely talked to for a year until he kind of got to know him, read him a little bit. Then one day he put his car keys in his hand and said, "I want you to drive my $50,000 car to New York and park it in the garage. Follow the bus and don't screw it up." And the student manager was scared to death. It was white knuckle driving all the way to New York.
I bet.
And had never been there, and he never felt more relieved than when he was able to park it and give Jim the keys back without a scratch. Well, you know who that student manager is? His name is Mark Daignault. And
oh
he's now
my!
The coach of the year with the Oklahoma City Thunder. So that's an example of how he really tests people, and as Mark says, he put the wind in his sails by trusting him and empowering him.
Boy, what a great story. I would never have guessed this. The first time I was aware of Mark Daignault was when he was coaching, and is now coaching, the Oklahoma City Thunder. He was a student manager at Connecticut, and that's something.
Student manager at UConn, yep.
So how is Connecticut feeling after winning the women's championship and getting knocked out in the men's after 2 great years under Hurley?
Well, I think there's always, of course, expectations with the men, and Hurley and his staff have really loaded up in the transfer portal. I think they're going to be right back in contention next year. And, you know, with Gino, there's just and the women's team, you know, I know we always talk about teams that have a lot of injuries, John, but I truly never saw a team that was hit with so many devastating injuries as they were for 3 years running. And what that did last year, they not only did they have everyone back and have a full complement of players, but because of players redshirting, they had overlapping of careers and a combination that they didn't even plan to have. They had they had Paige Beckers and Sarah Strong and A.Z. Fudd together, and they had freshmen guys who had started as freshmen for the injuries, and now they were experienced coming off the bench. So he just had an unbeatable combination. And once they got all those players in place and playing together, they're pretty much unbeatable. and they also have made use of the transfer portal. They're going to be the team to beat again. I think Gino is going to be going for a baker's dozen 13th championship next year.
You'd have to say, not just you, but anyone would have to say that men or women, Gino Auriemma is about as good a coach as you could possibly have.
Yeah, he's always had this amazing ability, John. They play games that everyone knows they're going to win by 50, and they win by 50, and yet he gets his players to play like it's 0-0 all the way to the end. His teams just really play hard and play well together. And you see what his players have done in the WNBA. They go in there really prepared. You know, Paige Beckers hit the ground running in the WNBA as a rookie.
Well, you can't be that good that long without being totally fabulous. So many things can complicate it. And as you mentioned, one thing can complicate it is injuries, which happened to the Yankees. Now, Dom and I are part of a group that goes out for delicious dinners in Manhattan. And it's usually all baseball, and not all the time, but mostly. Are you happy or amazed that the Yankees are doing so well?
Well, you know, when a team loses a great player like Juan Soto in free agency, John, it's not as easy as it sounds to take that money and spread it around. A lot of times when you do that, you get a lot of mediocre players.
Right.
But what the Yankees did, they did a great job. They took that money that he left behind and they got themselves a number one starter and a number one reliever and two fairly recent MVPs for the middle of their lineup. I mean, they really got quality with that money, and they still have $300 million to spare that from what he turned down. So they've really filled out their team, and I think they're a more complete team than they were last year. You know, I think they're better defensively with Grisham in center and Judge Beckery belongs in right, and then the younger players they have coming up. I think they're a more complete team than they were last year, don't you?
Oh, I absolutely think so. Soto was booed at Yankee Stadium, but actually it was the best thing ever happened to the Yankees. And I know I mentioned that when you hear that, it sounds like some Yankee announcer making face-saving. But no, I think they're a much better team. And I thought that was really phenomenal for the Yankees because of what Brian Cashman did, getting the right players. And they're a more complete team.
Yeah, that's the key, is getting the right players.
Oh, that is, because you can spend money and get guys coming in. For example, they're playing Colorado now. Chris Bryant is on the DL. They signed him to a phenomenal contract. He never plays.
Yeah, exactly. And you need a lot of those around baseball.
Oh, there's a lot. Absolutely. Are you happy with the game of baseball nowadays?
Well, I was a skeptic about the pitch clock, but it certainly has improved the pace.
Boy.
I think the pace of the game is so much better. I could do without the ghost runner. I don't think that really does much to end games earlier. How many times do you have 18, 20 inning games? Not very often. So I'm not too thrilled with that. But for the most part, I think it's got some great young stars. It tends to be very exciting. The thing I miss about baseball, John, and I bet you do too, is so much of it was just kind of living and dying and rooting for the starting pitcher. And when you see these starting pitchers only going 4 or 5 innings,
please.
This opener strategy, which I never figured out the advantage of that, you kind of lose that personal connection to a starting pitcher like you used to have. I think that's something that's really missing, and baseball, I think, would profit to try to put that back.
Well, I really kind of agree with that. As far as the Manfred man, or the X-Man, as I called him, because I wrote an X on my scorecard for the guy who would run. Normally, I would think that's terrible. That's awful. I can't stand it. But being a broadcaster, I wanted the game to get over. In time. Funny thing, Dom, I didn't see it because it was on one of those streaming. But the Mets and Dodgers played a game last night, interrupted by rain, I gather, several times. But anyway, it went to extra innings, and you figure in the 10th inning, guys on second base, no one out, bunt them to third and get them in. Do you know the game went 13 innings?
And, you see more of that than you'd ever imagine because teams just can't get a runner in from second base anymore with no outs. They don't believe in bunting him over. They don't seem to be able to hit the ball to the right side. And, you lose. The thing that you lose, I don't like the term small ball. What I think of it is situational hitting. And that's what's missing. Guys hitting in situations.
Agreed. There was a playoff game between Cleveland and Tampa a few years ago, and they couldn't score. Yeah. And Susan told me the story. And in the 11th inning or 12th inning or 13th inning, between innings, Tito Francona yells over to Kevin Cash, "Hey, Cashy, you want to put a runner on second?" So get a big fat plug-in for the Calhoun book.
All right. Well, again, the book is called "More Than a Game: How the UConn Culture Was Built on a Culture of How the UConn Dynasty Was Built on a Culture of Caring." It's Jim Calhoun's reflections on 15 of the players and people that he coached and the lives that he touched. And by the way, you'd be amazed at how he's still at 83. His phone is constantly ringing. I've been in his office, and Kemba Walker's on the phone, or Ray Allen's on the phone, or people like that. They all still stay in touch with him. He made lifetime connections with them, and that's what this book is going to be all about. It's going to be out. It could be pre-ordered right now on woodhallpress.com, and it'll be in fine bookstores very soon, hopefully by the middle of the summer, and the full release in the fall. And you'll be hearing a lot about it in Connecticut and nearby from Connecticut. We'll be doing book signings, and we'll be doing all kinds of things. Jim is raring to go to push it, as you know how he is. So that's the big fat plug, and appreciate if you go out and pick up a copy.
Yeah, I expect you to get a copy at home.
You absolutely will.
If you know what I mean. I did the foreword for a great Dom book on the history of the Yankees, beginning when they became the Highlanders in 1903. And you see the result. Dominic, thank you very much. I'm sure I'll see you soon. I hope so.
John, great. Good luck with the show. And, we'll absolutely be seeing you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Dom.